Hi, Glenn.
Hello,
Michelle
how are
Gardner,
you?
Arizona Republic. I guess the question on everybody's mind, the quarterback situation, your assessment on what you've seen from Emory and whatever he's done to this point in the program, and how soon you hope to make a decision on that spot.
Well, first, there's no immediate decision that would be made on that. Excited about where he's at. I mean, obviously, he's been here a few months with some change in rules has really helped us as far as trying to acclimate him, get him on the field actually with the ball. And he's been super proactive, super conscientious, takes fantastic notes. He's really on top of it. Obviously, he has the luxury of experience, and he's been around a couple of offenses, so he has some of that background, which has helps those older guys learn the system a little faster. But we're gonna, push him in there, give him, as many reps as we possibly can with that, number of quarterbacks. It's obviously a unique situation, but it is what it is. But we'll give all those guys ample opportunity to show what they can do.
Chris?
Glenn, Chris Cartman, Son of a Source, just to kind of build off of that, within the limitations that you have with a new quarterback coming in, what are the main things you can do to accelerate that development before you even get to your first practice, and how did Emory take to those things?
Well, I think probably the obvious question or obvious answer to that was just the X's and O's, right? Just the classroom work, understanding scheme, what we're trying to get done that way. But it's something as simple as calling a play in a huddle, breaking a huddle, getting to the line of scrimmage. It's something as minuscule as you think that would be. I think that's important, just creating that foundation of when practice one hit, that's not something new. That's something he's used to, has a comfort level, and can worry about bigger things than some of the more minuscule things that you would think would be.
And then even without working with him hands-on, from the feedback from other guys or Joe Connolly or whoever, what's the sense been about his sort of maturity, leadership, and some of those aspects?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, he obviously has years under his belt. At that position, obviously you need leadership, you need a proactive personality. I think he has all that. I think Joe's been super excited about not only what he brings from a physicality, from a skill set standpoint, but how he's been able to implement himself within the team. I think he's been receptive throughout the team. I think everybody likes him. Everybody respects his work ethic, what he's all about.
Greg right here, and then Craig in the back.
Greg Moore, Arizona Republic. Coach, good to meet you.
You too, man.
What can you tell me about your running backs? And what can you tell me about the importance of a strong run game, even in a pass-happy football world?
I think we're super excited about the running back. Me coming here initially in the spring, that was a little bit of an unknown for me, but going through the spring, seeing what those guys have been able to do, I'm really excited about that room. Obviously, X is creating some notoriety in the media as far as some preseason recognitions and so forth. But what he's done, not only on the field, but in this building, as far as his impact on the team, has been really impressive. He's been voted to the Captain's Council. As a new guy, I think that's a huge compliment to him and what people think of him and what he's bringing to the table. Daniel, you guys know Daniel with limited reps last year, but every time he got in there, he was productive, he was effective, and I think we would continue that trend moving forward. And then the young guys with like Tevin, he came early, so I think he's a guy that's really made a nice leap in the right direction. Being a young guy, but being here in the spring, he's transformed his body. He's put on some weight, some muscle, some speed. Obviously has an understanding of scheme. So I think we're excited about where he's at. Even at being a young guy, he's ahead of the game.
Craig and then Cole.
Coach Craig Fouye, ABC 15. Hey, you've gone through a huge transition here this spring and summer with the guys. How are things going? I mean, implementing the new offense and where guys are. A lot of new guys on the roster. You're new. How's it gone?
It's been fantastic. It really has. I mean, even today, for example, is a day off for the players, but there's a building full of guys out getting extra work in. So I think that's a compliment to the culture that's in the building and how those guys are working to create a standard and an expectation. So, and that's been consistent throughout the summer. I mean, from the feedback that I've gotten from the weight room, the training room, everybody's, taking it above and beyond and trying to create accountability, not only from player to coaches, but from player to player, which is super exciting to see.
And what are we going to see? What are we going to see offensively?
Well, I think the execution is at the end of the day, the most important. I mean, we can talk all the fancy and the X's and O's and all that, but if we can get done what we're trying to get done, I think at the end of the day, you're going to have success. So I think consistency and then the execution piece, if you have those, then good things will happen.
Cole, Julia, then Jordan.
Glenn, Cole Topham, Devil's Digest. If you were to describe your scheme to the average ASU fan, what would it be?
Well, I've used this term, I've used this answer before, and it's a little cliche, but I think you have to play to your personnel grouping. You know, I've been fortunate in my career to play in a spread style. I've been obviously in the pro style system. I've been in a heavy personnel grouping, so I think you can play to your personnel. So, and I think we have a unique skill set here from a personnel standpoint that we can play to a little bit of both, right? Like we can play to a 22 personnel where you're getting a fullback, 2 tight ends, and then you can be in a 12 personnel where you're in 2 tight ends, or we have enough receivers and enough guys on the perimeter that we can now spread it out. So I think that from a defensive perspective gives those guys a lot of different looks and, you know, creates some more advantages hopefully on our end.
And specifically 12 personnel with those tight ends and the amount of athleticism you have at that position on your roster, what advantages does that create for the offense and simultaneously the disadvantages it creates for the defense?
Well, I think it all starts to the run game, as you mentioned the run game earlier. I think it all starts from that. You know, you start putting 2 tight ends in the game, not only do you create blocking surfaces and more gaps that the defense has to account for, but now all of a sudden now they're involved in safeties. Right now they're in an 8-man spacing, which, you know, you play the game of safeties. Now, do we take a shot over the top? You know, do we account for safeties in the run game? You know, it just creates that much more variety that you can do on offense.
Julia?
Glenn, Julia Lopez here from AZ Family. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You worked with Chuck Williams last year, Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. Do you see any of him in Zalade at all?
I do. I think the athleticism, the skill set's very similar. He's explosive. He has mass. He can carry a big load throughout the game if needed. I don't think you go into a game saying, hey, you're going to carry it 30 times, but you have the hot hand, let's roll. You know, let's give it to him and let him do his thing. So I think there are a lot of similarities. The leadership piece probably plays into that as well. So I think there are some similarities.
Jordan? And then Chris?
Coach Jordan Ham, Sports 360 AZ. The wide receiver room doesn't have a ton of experience at the college football level, but one guy who has played a lot is Cameron Johnson over the years. How have you seen him kind of step up as a leader of that group?
Yeah, very similar to Emory with the history, the background. I think he's played under several offensive coordinators, so has had to learn multiple schemes through his career. So I think the transition of scheme has been not necessarily ideal, but it's been faster because of that. I think he's got a nice foundation of scheme. You know, he's a smart guy. He can really pick it up. Now we'll see the transition from classroom to field. That'll be the next thing. But I think we're super optimistic. You know, again, he's one of those guys that really molded within the team, and I think he's been receptive to the team and excited about what he brings. You know, as some other guys, you know, in that room need to.
Glenn, Luke Liddon with 12 Sports. Appreciate your time. I'm curious. I asked Herm this question. I want to get your thoughts on it. When it comes to the quarterback position, and you guys haven't named a starter yet, how challenging is it for you to move that offense forward and find that identity? Do you feel like you're in a little bit of a holding pattern? I know you're going to find out a lot in the coming weeks. What's kind of your process when it comes to that?
I don't know if we have much time to be holding, you know, at this point, right? It's August 1st. We got to go. So I think we have to force that issue a little bit, but also give each guy the ample opportunity to show what they can do. So I think you have to be fluid with your rotation, you know, get each guy in there with whatever the personnel grouping is, whatever the situation might be, and show what they can do. So I think we're going to be more aggressive than proactive when that's, you know, as far as that's concerned. What that time is yet to be determined, but, you know, we need to figure out sooner than later.
Chris?
Glenn, you talk about the importance of being adaptive to personnel. You have as many tight ends as receivers and some versatile athletes at that position. Without giving away, obviously, too much, do you think that it lends itself to getting into more 2 tight end stuff? You know, tight end, fullback. You know, what do you see from the?
Yeah, I think so, and I think you can get creative with formationing too. Like, you know, a lot of times that's kind of the go-to is personnel, but I think you can get not only personnel but formationing. So, you know, through the years you see big personnel groupings, but you're in a spread set, or vice versa. Maybe you're in a small personnel and you bunch them all down and get condensed set. So I think you can get creative not only in personnel groupings, but also formations within that personnel grouping. So that's one thing that we've really been able, you know, conscious to do, take a step back as we've self-scouted ourselves from the spring is like, hey, with these personnel groupings, how can we be creative with personnel, maybe create some one-on-ones, create some matchups in anticipation of what they're going to do to us defensively and create some positives.
Just if I try to understand that better, so you're talking about without huddling, being able to get guys into different alignments, move your receivers, move your tight ends to the outside, inside, to force defenses to make decisions about who they're putting on the field.
Yeah, so I mean, you talk about like a Messiah. I mean, big, long, rangy target that can run. Jalen, obviously athletic. He's got the skill set of a receiver, but the mass of a tight end. So, that's a tough matchup defensively. And then how can we, take a step back and look how can we, benefit from what they bring to the table.
Do you think that's a, sort of football scheme ebbs and flows? We saw Utah have a lot of success with its tight ends. Do you think that it's like there are teams that are doing that at a leading edge of something that may start to move the needle back in that direction?
Well, I think if you have the personnel to do that, I think you need to do that. I don't know if it's necessarily a new thing. I mean, I've been with like Tony Gonzalez, for example. I mean, he's the best to ever play. How can we match him up on a one-on-one, on a maybe a lesser frame type guy, you know what I mean? So I think if you have those personnel groupings, definitely utilize them. You have an advantage that way.
Thanks.
Mark?
Hey, Coach Mark McClune, 3TV CBS 5. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Curious just about Emory at the quarterback position. How does playing in the SEC and seeing those defenses help him in his transition and competition for quarterback here?
I wouldn't speak to the SEC specifically. I think it's just the reps that he has. I think he's got a comfort level in the pocket. You see that when during the recruiting process, you see that that he's calm, he's poised, he can work through progressions in the pocket. So we were excited about when we started the recruiting process with him. That was something that I think would be a smooth transition, as opposed to maybe a younger guy who has those limited reps that you get a little restless in there when you first start taking some snaps. He's got a little bit more patience and can see what's happening to him and react accordingly.
Anyone else? Chris, go ahead.
It's, you have a lot of new transfers on the offensive line. What do you see from some of the position battles? The left tackle, Boldy Glass. You bring Joey Ramos in. He could maybe play tackle or guard. So what do you see from some of those things?
What I'm excited about, probably the most of that, is the position flexibility. Like you're saying, he could play tackle, could play guard. So Joey's played tackle and he's played center. Thomas Labossiere, he's played some guard. He can play some tackle. So I think there's some flexibility that way, which we're excited about. That gives you depth on the road. You obviously it takes limited amount of numbers on the road. So now all of a sudden, God forbid somebody a tackle gets hurt, well, he could play here or play center, whatever the case, right? So that's probably what I'm excited about. It brings depth, flexibility, and they're all great kids, man. They're working hard. The camaraderie in that room, it's really cool. They got a lot of cool personalities, so it's been fun to be around those guys. And now it's just accelerating that learning process, right? Like you say, because of limited reps, accelerating that learning process. So once the lights come on, they're ready to roll.